Commander Lysander Thorne pressed his palm against the cold metal of the observation deck's viewport, watching the endless expanse of stars that had been humanity's domain for barely 3 centuries. The UES Prometheus, humanity's most advanced deep space exploration vessel, drifted silently through the Kepler 442 system, its mission to establish the farthest human outpost yet conceived. What Lysander didn't know was that his ship was about to become the focal point of the most significant event in galactic history. Dr. Serafina Valdez burst through the bridge doors, her usually pristine lab coat wrinkled and stained with coffee. Her dark eyes, which had analyzed countless stellar phenomena, now held a mixture of terror and fascination that made Lysander's stomach clench. "Commander, you need to see this immediately," she breathed, clutching a data pad against her chest like a shield. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Captain Zephyr Kane, Lysander's second-in-command, abandoned his tactical display and moved closer. His weathered face, marked by decades of frontier service, showed the kind of concern that came from experiencing genuine danger. "What is it, Doctor?" Lysander asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. Serafina activated the main display, and the screen filled with a complex waveform pattern that pulsed with mathematical precision. "This signal originated from the 4th planet in this system. It's not natural, Commander. The frequency modulation follows prime number sequences, and the amplitude variations contain embedded geometric progressions. This is definitely artificial intelligence attempting communication." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We're not alone out here." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical force. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if they were unique in the universe, scanning the cosmos for any sign of intelligent life. Now, on the edge of known space, that question had been answered. Lysander felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders as he realized that whatever happened next would echo through generations. Zephyr moved to his console, his fingers dancing across tactical readouts. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures coming from the planet's surface. Whatever sent that signal has technology that makes our fusion reactors look like campfires." His voice carried the steady professionalism of a career military officer, but Lysander could hear the underlying tension. Serafina continued her analysis, her excitement overriding her fear. "The signal structure suggests a highly advanced mathematical understanding. These beings have discovered principles that our best theorists have only hypothesized about. The communication protocol alone represents a leap forward of centuries, maybe millennia, beyond our current capabilities." Lysander studied the alien transmission, trying to comprehend the magnitude of this moment. First contact protocols had been theoretical exercises, academic discussions held in comfortable conference rooms on Earth. Now, faced with the reality of another intelligent species, those protocols felt woefully inadequate. "Can we decode the message?" he asked. "I'm working on it," Serafina replied, her fingers flying across her interface. "The mathematical foundation is becoming clearer. They're using universal constants as reference points, building a linguistic framework based on physics principles. It's actually quite elegant." She paused, frowning at her readings. "Commander, there's something else. The signal contains emotional markers, tonal variations that suggest urgency, possibly distress." The bridge crew exchanged glances, each understanding that they stood at a crossroads that would define humanity's future. Lysander made the decision that would alter the course of galactic civilization. "Open a channel. We're going to respond." As Serafina began composing humanity's first interstellar message, none of them could have predicted that this exchange would ultimately transform the very nature of warfare across a dozen star systems, challenging the fundamental assumptions that had governed galactic conflict for millennia. Warprime Thexkai stood in the command chamber of the hegemony dreadnought Eternal Dominion, his 6 arms manipulating holographic displays with practiced efficiency. For 800 cycles, the Zalari hegemony had maintained absolute military supremacy across the known galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Their philosophy was simple: identify, categorize, and either absorb or eliminate. No species had ever presented a significant challenge to their established order. The pristine white walls of the command chamber reflected Thexkai's imposing figure. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless victories, each mark a testament to the hegemony's inexorable expansion. His compound eyes, capable of processing multiple spectrums simultaneously, focused on the tactical display showing the primitive human vessel that had dared to respond to their standard territorial claim. Strategist Vailnoth approached with the measured gait characteristic of the intellectual caste. Her smaller frame and pale blue skin marked her as one of the planning elite, responsible for analyzing new species and determining their potential value to the hegemony. War Prime, we have completed our initial assessment of the human response. Thexkai's mandibles clicked in anticipation. Report, strategist. What classification do these creatures merit? Vailnoth activated her personal display, projecting the analysis into the command chamber's central holosphere. The humans demonstrate basic understanding of mathematical principles and show rudimentary technological development. Their vessel appears to be constructed using fusion-based energy systems and primitive metallurgy. Based on standard parameters, they qualify as Class 7 entities, suitable for either incorporation as labor resources or elimination if they prove resistant to absorption. The War Prime studied the human ship through the viewports of his dreadnought. The vessel was tiny compared to hegemony standards, barely a tenth the size of his smallest escort craft. Its design showed creative engineering but lacked the elegant efficiency that characterized truly advanced civilizations. Their message contained what our linguists interpreted as curiosity and an offer of peaceful exchange, Vailnoth continued. This suggests a non-aggressive species that may accept subordination without significant resistance. Fleet Commander Rakstar, whose massive frame bore the ritual scarification of the warrior caste, gestured dismissively. War Prime, we have encountered 47 species in the past 50 cycles. 31 accepted absorption after demonstrations of our superior capabilities. 16 required elimination. These humans appear unremarkable in every measurable way. Thexkai considered the assessment, his tactical mind already formulating the standard approach. The hegemony's success came from their methodical efficiency. They would demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, present the humans with 2 options, submission or destruction, and expand their territory by one more insignificant system. Prepare the standard compliance demonstration. Full spectrum energy display, gravitational manipulation, and temporal distortion fields. If they surrender immediately, we will preserve their population for integration into our workforce. What none of the hegemony officers understood was that their fundamental assumption about warfare was about to be challenged by a species that had learned to fight not through technological superiority, but through something far more dangerous: adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for principles they held sacred. Vailnoth began coordinating the demonstration, accessing the tactical database that contained detailed protocols for first contact scenarios. War Prime, shall we also prepare the historical documentation package? Some species find comfort in understanding their place within the greater hegemony structure. Proceed, Thexkai replied, his attention already shifting to the next system on their expansion schedule. To him, the humans represented nothing more than a minor administrative task, a brief delay in the hegemony's inevitable growth. He could not have imagined that within the next few cycles, the small human vessel would become the catalyst for a revolution in military thinking that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of warfare itself. Commander Lysander Thorne watched in silent awe as space around the Prometheus began to distort. The hegemony dreadnought had materialized seemingly from nowhere, its massive bulk defying every principle of physics that humanity understood. The vessel stretched for kilometers, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe as if alive. Energy discharges danced across its hull like aurora, each pulse representing more power than Earth's entire electrical grid could generate. Dr. Serafina Valdez stood transfixed at her sensor station, her instruments recording phenomena that shouldn't exist. Commander, they're manipulating local spacetime. The gravitational readings are impossible, they're creating localized distortions that should collapse into singularities, but somehow maintaining perfect stability. Her voice carried the wonder of a scientist witnessing the impossible, mixed with the terror of someone who understood the implications. The alien ship began its demonstration with subtle displays of power. Stars in the background flickered as the vessel bent light around itself, creating visual effects that made the Prometheus crew question their own perception. Then came the gravitational manipulation. Asteroids throughout the system began moving in perfect geometric formations, arranging themselves into complex patterns that spelled out mathematical equations in three-dimensional space. Captain Zephyr Kane gripped his command console, his knuckles white with tension. Their technology is beyond anything in our databases. One ship that size could glass entire continents without breaking formation. He paused, studying the tactical readouts. Commander, we're receiving a transmission. The main screen filled with the image of Warprime Thexkai, his alien features imposing and utterly inhuman. When he spoke, the translation algorithm struggled to convey not just his words but the inherent authority in his voice. Primitive species of the third planet, you exist now at the discretion of the Zalari hegemony. We offer you a choice that 47 civilizations before you have faced. Lysander felt the weight of his species' survival settling on his shoulders. Around him, the bridge crew maintained their posts with professional discipline, but he could see the fear in their eyes. They all understood that they were witnessing humanity's first contact with a vastly superior alien civilization. Thexkai continued his pronouncement with the casual authority of absolute power. You may submit to integration within our greater structure, accepting your designated role as a client species under hegemony protection. Your technology will be improved, your population sustained, and your world preserved as a productive member of our collective. Alternatively, you may choose resistance, in which case your species will be eliminated efficiently and your system claimed for more suitable inhabitants. The alien commander gestured, and suddenly the space around the Prometheus filled with smaller craft that had somehow approached without detection. Each vessel was still larger than the human ship, their weapon systems visibly charging with energy that made the void itself shimmer. You have one planetary rotation to consider our generous offer. We suggest you use this time wisely. Dr. Valdez turned from her station, her face pale but determined. Commander, their technology is at least 1,000 years beyond ours. Their energy manipulation capabilities alone could restructure matter at the atomic level. From a purely scientific standpoint, resistance seems. She struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like surrender. Zephyr stepped forward, his military bearing unchanged despite the impossible odds. With respect, Doctor, some things matter more than technological advancement. He faced Lysander directly. Sir, we both know what Earth's response would be to this ultimatum. The question is whether we honor that response or make decisions based on fear. Lysander looked out at the alien fleet surrounding his ship, calculating odds that no human commander had ever faced. The rational choice was obvious: humanity couldn't fight this level of technological superiority. But as he considered the faces of his crew, he realized that the rational choice might not be the right choice. Something in the aliens' casual dismissal of human value sparked a fire that would soon burn across the galaxy. Admiral Cassius Forge received Lysander's transmission 18 hours later at Earth Defense Command, his weathered face reflecting the burden of decisions that would determine humanity's survival. The message from the Prometheus had traveled through quantum relay stations across 3 star systems, each word carrying the weight of species-level extinction. As Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces, Cassius had prepared for many scenarios, but none quite like this. The emergency session of the Global Defense Council convened within hours, representatives from every major nation gathering in the secure chamber beneath Geneva. The holographic display showed the alien fleet surrounding the Prometheus, their technological superiority evident in every impossible maneuver they performed. President Chen Weiming of the Pacific Federation spoke first, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. Admiral Forge, what are our realistic options? Cassius stood before the assembled leaders, his uniform bearing decorations from conflicts that now seemed insignificant compared to the current threat. Honorable delegates, from a purely military standpoint, resistance appears futile. The aliens demonstrate technology centuries beyond our capabilities. Their single dreadnought could likely destroy our entire fleet without sustaining damage. He paused, meeting the eyes of each leader. However, surrender guarantees the end of human autonomy forever. Secretary-General Yuki Tanaka of the European Union leaned forward, her diplomat's mind seeking alternatives. Have we considered negotiation? Perhaps we could establish some form of autonomous territory within their larger structure? Dr. Elena Restrepo, Earth's chief science advisor, activated her personal display. Based on Commander Thorne's data, the hegemony operates on a strict hierarchical model. They've encountered 47 previous species, all of which were either absorbed or eliminated. There's no indication they recognize the concept of equal partnerships. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. Minister David Okafor of the African Continental Alliance spoke quietly, so we choose between slavery and death. Are these truly our only options? Cassius felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Every decision made in this room would echo through generations, assuming humanity survived to have generations. There is a third option, he said, his voice carrying the conviction that had made him humanity's finest military commander. We fight, but not the way they expect. General Sarah Liu of the Asian Defense Coalition raised an eyebrow. Admiral, you just explained why direct confrontation is impossible. Direct confrontation, yes, Cassius agreed. But these aliens have operated under the same paradigm for centuries. They encounter a species, demonstrate overwhelming force, and present an ultimatum. Every civilization they've faced has responded predictably, either immediate surrender or futile resistance using conventional tactics. He began pacing, his strategic mind already formulating possibilities. But what if we don't respond conventionally? President Chen asked the question that hung in everyone's mind. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? Cassius activated the chamber's main display, showing Earth's defensive capabilities alongside human colonies across 12 star systems. The aliens expect us to either submit or fight a traditional space battle. They've structured their entire approach around technological superiority and overwhelming force. But humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology, it's been our adaptability, our creativity, and our willingness to sacrifice for principles we hold sacred. He highlighted specific installations and fleet positions. We don't fight their kind of war. We fight our kind of war. Guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, asymmetric strategies that their rigid hierarchical thinking can't predict or counter. We make them question not just our capabilities, but their fundamental assumptions about what warfare means. Dr. Restrepo looked troubled. Admiral, you're talking about strategies that could result in massive human casualties. Doctor, Cassius replied solemnly, we're already facing massive human casualties. The question is whether we die on our knees or standing up. He turned to address the full council. I'm not advocating suicide. I'm advocating for a response so unexpected, so fundamentally different from anything they've encountered, that it forces them to reconsider their entire approach to conquest. The vote was closer than history would record, but humanity chose to fight. Commander Lysander Thorne stood before the alien Warprime's image on his main screen, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and determination. Behind him, his crew maintained their positions with discipline that would have made Earth proud, each face reflecting the same resolution that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. The hegemony fleet continued its ominous patrol around the Prometheus, their casual displays of power a constant reminder of the vast technological gulf between the species. Warprime Thexkai, Lysander began, his voice steady despite knowing that his next words would likely trigger humanity's extinction. I have received Earth's response to your ultimatum. He paused, studying the alien commander's inhuman features for any sign of expectation or surprise. Humanity respectfully declines both of your options. Thexkai's compound eyes shifted slightly, the first sign of something other than casual dismissal that Lysander had observed. Explain this response, human. You reject both integration and elimination? These are the only paths available to your species. Dr. Serafina Valdez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. War Prime, you've encountered 47 civilizations, but you've never encountered humanity. We don't fit into your binary classification system because we've learned something that your rigid hierarchy apparently hasn't. The alien commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation or confusion. State your meaning, primitive creature. Lysander took control of the conversation, knowing that every word now carried the weight of his species' future. We've learned that there are principles worth dying for, War Prime. Freedom, dignity, the right to determine our own destiny, these aren't negotiable commodities to be traded for survival. Captain Zephyr Kane moved to the tactical station, his hands moving across the controls with practiced precision. Hegemony Fleet, this is Captain Kane of the UES Prometheus. We're transmitting detailed specifications of our vessel's construction, our technological capabilities, and our defensive systems. We want you to understand exactly what you're fighting. Strategist Vailnoth appeared beside Thexkai on the transmission, her pale features showing confusion. War Prime, their tactical data confirms our initial assessment. Their technology is primitive, their weapons inadequate for penetrating even our escort vessel's defensive screens. This appears to be an elaborate form of suicide. Lysander smiled grimly. Strategist Vailnoth, you're correct about our technological limitations. But you're wrong about suicide. What you're witnessing is something your databases probably don't contain, a species that's willing to fight a war it cannot win because winning isn't the only measure of victory. The transmission ended, and the Hegemony Fleet began moving into attack formation. But something was wrong with their approach. Instead of the swift, decisive strike that had characterized 47 previous conquests, the aliens seemed hesitant, their movements lacking the confidence that had defined their military doctrine. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, War Prime Thexkai found himself facing a situation that challenged every assumption in the Hegemony's strategic database. Strategist, explain their behavior. No species has ever chosen certain destruction over integration or efficient elimination. Vailnoth studied the readings from the human vessel, her analytical mind struggling with data that didn't fit established patterns. War Prime, their physiological responses indicate genuine conviction rather than deception or madness. They appear to genuinely believe that their choice is rational. Fleet Commander Rakstar rumbled with frustration. War Prime, shall we simply destroy them and proceed with system occupation? Their philosophical posturing cannot affect our tactical superiority. But Thexkai found himself hesitating. In 800 cycles of conquest, no species had ever responded this way. The humans' choice was strategically nonsensical, yet their conviction was absolute. Delay the attack, he ordered, his voice carrying an uncertainty that his subordinates had never heard before. I want to understand what we're truly facing. Unknown to the Hegemony, the Prometheus had just transmitted something far more dangerous than weapon specifications. It had transmitted an idea that would spread through the galaxy like wildfire, challenging the very foundations of how civilizations understood power, conquest, and the meaning of victory itself. War Prime Thexkai paced the command chamber of the Eternal Dominion, his 6 arms gesticulating in patterns that reflected his growing agitation. For 3 cycles, the human vessel had remained stationary, neither attacking nor retreating, simply maintaining position while broadcasting what they called messages of principle to any species within communication range. What disturbed the War Prime most was not the content of these messages, but the fact that other species were beginning to respond. Strategist Vailnoth approached with data that would have been inconceivable just days earlier. War Prime, we're receiving communications from 17 previously absorbed client species. The Corvin mining colonies have ceased production, claiming they need time to reconsider their relationship with the Hegemony. The Thetian agricultural worlds are requesting permission to send representatives to observe the human situation. The implications struck Thexkai like a physical blow. The hegemony's power structure depended on the absolute acceptance of their technological and cultural superiority. Client species served willingly because they believed integration was preferable to extinction. But the humans had introduced a third option that threatened the entire foundation of hegemony control. Fleet Commander Rakstar stormed into the chamber, his massive frame radiating frustration. War Prime, the Etherian Republic has withdrawn from the non-aggression pact we established 50 cycles ago. They claim they're implementing something they call humanitarian observations regarding our treatment of the humans. He paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. They're mobilizing their fleet. Dr. Serafina Valdez continued her scientific analysis aboard the Prometheus, unaware that her detailed transmissions about human psychology and social structure were being studied by xenobiologists across the galaxy. Her description of concepts like individual dignity, consensual government, and principled resistance was spreading through alien academic networks faster than the hegemony could suppress it. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Commander Lysander Thorne monitored incoming communications with growing amazement. Captain Kane, we're receiving messages from species we've never heard of. The Yarati Collective wants to know more about our concept of democratic representation. Something called the Nexus Commonwealth is asking for detailed information about our historical resistance movements. Captain Zephyr Kane studied the tactical display, noting changes in hegemony fleet positioning that suggested growing uncertainty among their commanders. Commander, their attack formations are becoming increasingly defensive. They're repositioning to guard against threats that don't exist yet. The real breakthrough came when the Corvan mining colonies transmitted a message directly to the Prometheus. The Corvans had been absorbed by the hegemony 60 cycles earlier, their mineral-rich worlds making them valuable additions to the Empire. But their message carried implications that sent shockwaves through both human and hegemony command structures. Humans of the vessel Prometheus, the transmission began, translated through algorithms that struggled with concepts the galaxy had forgotten. We are Corvan Prime Director Thulmos. Your words about choice and dignity have awakened memories of what we once were before integration. We wish to learn more about this concept you call independence. Similar messages began arriving from client species throughout hegemony space. The Thetians, the Valdari, the Binary Collective, civilizations that had accepted absorption generations ago were suddenly questioning their place in the hegemony structure. What had begun as humanity's defiant last stand was evolving into something far more dangerous, a galactic awakening. Strategist Vailnoth presented her analysis to the War Prime with obvious reluctance. War Prime, our sociological models indicate cascade probability exceeding 90%. The humans have introduced a conceptual virus that threatens social stability throughout our territory. She paused, her pale features showing genuine concern. If we eliminate them now, they become martyrs. If we allow them to continue, they inspire active resistance. There appears to be no strategic response that maintains status quo conditions. For the first time in 800 cycles of expansion, the Zalari hegemony faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated through technological superiority. The humans had weaponized hope itself, and it was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Admiral Cassius Forge stood in Earth Defense Command's war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements across dozens of star systems. What had begun as humanity's desperate last stand had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a rebellion of ideas that transcended species boundaries. The tactical displays showed hegemony forces retreating from 17 systems as client species declared independence, while previously neutral civilizations offered support to the growing resistance movement. The transformation had been swift and utterly unexpected. The Corvan mining colonies had been the first to openly declare independence, their message inspiring similar declarations from the Thetian agricultural worlds and the Valdari research stations. Within days, the carefully maintained order that had defined hegemony space for centuries began collapsing as species after species chose the uncertainty of freedom over the security of subjugation. Commander Lysander Thorne's regular transmissions from the Prometheus had become a focal point for what alien sociologists were calling the human paradigm, the revolutionary concept that technological inferiority didn't necessarily mean cultural or philosophical inferiority. His ship remained surrounded by the hegemony fleet, but the standoff had evolved into something more complex than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Serafina Valdez found herself serving as humanity's inadvertent ambassador to species she'd never imagined existed. Her scientific reports had been transformed into philosophical treatises that challenged fundamental assumptions about civilization, progress, and the nature of intelligence itself. "Admiral," she transmitted from the Prometheus, "I'm receiving communications from university networks across 12 different species. They want to establish what they're calling academic exchange programs to study human social structures." Warprime Thexkai faced a crisis that military force couldn't resolve. His strategic advisors presented him with scenarios that all led to the same conclusion: the hegemony's expansion model was fundamentally broken. Warprime, strategist Vailnath reported, her voice carrying the strain of weeks without effective solutions, "The Etherian Republic has announced a formal alliance with something they're calling the Free Species Coalition. 17 of our former client worlds have joined this coalition." The breaking point came when Fleet Commander Rackstar presented intelligence that changed everything. "Warprime, we've intercepted communications indicating that several member species within the hegemony itself are beginning to question absorption policies. The Veil 3 Science Cast has submitted formal requests for cultural autonomy, and the Nexari artisan guilds are demanding representation in policy decisions." For 800 cycles, the hegemony had maintained order through the simple principle that resistance was futile. But the humans had proven that futility wasn't the point. Their willingness to fight for principles rather than practical outcomes had introduced a new variable into galactic politics: the power of moral conviction to inspire action regardless of probable outcomes. Captain Zephyr Kane monitored communications from the expanding resistance movement with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Commander Thorne, we're receiving reports that the Free Species Coalition is organizing something they call defensive cooperation agreements. They're not planning to attack the hegemony, but they're committed to protecting each other's independence." The galaxy was reorganizing itself around new principles that placed individual dignity and consensual governance above technological efficiency and centralized control. The hegemony found itself facing not a military enemy they could defeat, but a philosophical revolution they couldn't comprehend. Thexkai made the decision that would define the new galactic order. "All units, stand down from combat readiness. We are entering negotiations with the Free Species Coalition." He paused, his compound eyes studying the impossible situation humanity had created. "It appears we must learn new definitions of victory and defeat." 5 years after first contact, Commander Lysander Thorne stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock at the sprawling facility that had become the center of the Free Species Coalition. The station orbited the same star where the Prometheus had made its desperate stand, serving as a reminder that the most significant victories often came from choices that seemed like certain defeat. The galaxy had been transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The Zalari hegemony still existed, but as one member of the coalition rather than its dominant force. Warprime Thexkai, now holding the title of strategic coordinator, had become an unlikely advocate for what historians were calling the principled resistance doctrine, the revolutionary idea that moral conviction could overcome technological disadvantage. Dr. Serafina Valdez directed the coalition's new Institute for Interspecies Understanding, where representatives from 43 different civilizations studied the complex relationships between technology, culture, and freedom. Her research had evolved beyond pure science into something that resembled philosophy, exploring questions about consciousness, dignity, and the nature of true intelligence that transcended mere technological achievement. The transformation hadn't been without cost. Admiral Cassius Forge had died 2 years earlier, leading the defense of the Corvin colonies when hegemony hardliners attempted to reassert control through force. His sacrifice had cemented the coalition's resolve and demonstrated that the principles humanity had introduced were worth defending with lives. Captain Zephyr Kane now commanded the Coalition Defense Force, implementing strategies based on cooperation rather than conquest. But perhaps the most profound change was in how species understood warfare itself. The old paradigm of technological superiority determining victory had been replaced by complex considerations of moral authority, popular support, and long-term social stability. Military academies across the galaxy now taught courses on asymmetric moral warfare and principled resistance theory, concepts that would have been incomprehensible before humanity's first contact. Lysander often reflected on the moment when everything changed. It hadn't been when the Prometheus fired its first shot, it never had. It hadn't been when the hegemony fleet arrived with overwhelming force. The turning point had been the simple act of choosing principles over survival, inspiring others to remember what they had forgotten about the value of freedom and dignity. The irony wasn't lost on him that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization had been to lose a war in the most spectacular way possible. The Prometheus had never defeated a single hegemony vessel, never captured enemy territory, never achieved any traditional military objective. But by refusing to accept the only choices they'd been given, they had created new possibilities that changed how an entire galaxy understood the nature of victory and defeat. As Lysander watched the peaceful traffic around Unity Station, he sometimes wondered what the galaxy might have looked like if humanity had chosen differently. The hegemony's offer of integration would have preserved human lives and allowed continued technological advancement. But it would have also meant accepting a universe where technological might determined moral right, where the powerful could dictate terms to the weak simply because they possessed superior weapons. The stars looked different now, filled with the lights of ships from species that had learned they could choose their own destinies. Some nights, Lysander could swear he heard an echo of humanity's first defiant response spreading through the cosmos, the simple, revolutionary idea that some principles were worth more than survival itself, and that true victory sometimes meant being willing to lose everything for the right to remain free. The galaxy had learned to wage war with ideas rather than weapons, and humanity's greatest battle had been won not through conquest, but through the courage to say no when surrender seemed like the only rational choice.